Welcome, dear listeners, to History with Herodotus, where we embark on a journey through the annals of time, uncovering the hidden treasures of our collective past. Today, we find ourselves at the threshold of a pivotal moment in American history, as we delve into the fascinating story of the First Battle of Bull Run. This seminal event, which took place on July 21, 1861, marked a turning point in the American Civil War, a conflict that would go on to shape the very fabric of the United States. As we set out to explore the origins of this battle, let us first transport ourselves to the sweltering summer of 1861, amidst the rolling hills and verdant forests of Virginia. The air is thick with tension, as the Union and Confederate armies face off against each other, their intentions locked in a struggle that would determine the fate of a nation. We find ourselves near the small town of Manassas, where the Warrenton Turnpike and the Orange and Alexandria Railroad intersect, a strategic location that would soon become the focal point of the battle. To understand the events leading up to the First Battle of Bull Run, we must delve into the complex web of politics and ideologies that defined the ERA. The election of Abraham Lincoln as President of the United States in November 1860 had set off a chain reaction of secessions, as Southern states, fearing the abolition of slavery, began to withdraw from the Union. By the spring of 1861, 7 states had seceded, and the Confederacy was born. The newly formed Confederate government, led by President Jefferson Davis, began to mobilize its military forces, with General P.G.T. Beauregard playing a key role in the defense of Virginia. Meanwhile, the Union Army, under the command of General Winfield Scott, was preparing to march on the Confederate capital of Richmond. As the summer of 1861 wore on, skirmishes and maneuvers between Union and Confederate forces became increasingly frequent. On June 10, 1861, a clash occurred at Big Bethel, Virginia, marking one of the first encounters between the two armies. This was followed by a series of smaller engagements, including the Battle of Hoke's Run in western Virginia. In July 1861, the Union Army, now under the command of General Irvin McDowell, began to advance on Manassas, with the goal of capturing the strategic railroad junction and paving the way for a march on Richmond. The Confederate forces, led by General Beauregard, were well entrenched in the area, having established a defensive line along the banks of Bull Run. As we stand at the precipice of this pivotal moment in American history, we find ourselves on the cusp of a great transformation. The First Battle of Bull Run, with all its chaos and confusion, is about to unfold before our eyes. The stage is set for a clash of epic proportions, as two armies, each with its own unique strengths and weaknesses, prepare to meet in battle. With the armies poised on the brink of conflict, the fate of a nation hangs in the balance. In our next segment, we will immerse ourselves in the midst of this battle, as the Union and Confederate armies clash in a frenzy of artillery fire, musket shots, and cavalry charges, and explore the key events and turning points that would shape the course of the war. Welcome back to History with Herodotus, as we continue our journey through the annals of time, uncovering the hidden treasures of our collective past. As we transport ourselves to the sweltering summer of 1861, we find ourselves near the small town of Manassas, Virginia, where the Warrenton Turnpike and the Orange and Alexandria Railroad intersect. The air is thick with tension, as the Union Army, under the command of General Irvin McDowell, advances on the Confederate defensive line along the banks of Bull Run. The Confederate forces, led by General P.G.T. Beauregard, are well entrenched in the area, having established a series of fortified positions to repel the Union attack. On July 21, 1861, the battle begins as Union artillery opens fire on the Confederate positions near Matthews Hill. The Confederates respond with a barrage of their own, and soon the battlefield is filled with the sounds of cannon fire, musket shots, and the cries of the wounded. As the day wears on, the Union Army launches a series of assaults against the Confederate lines, but each attack is repelled by the determined defenders. One of the most significant turning points in the battle occurs when the Union Army's 1st Virginia Cavalry, led by Colonel William T. Sherman, clashes with the Confederate cavalry near the Henry House Hill. The Confederate cavalry, led by Colonel James Ewell Brown Jeb Stuart, puts up a fierce resistance, but ultimately, the Union cavalry is forced to retreat. As the battle rages on, the Confederates launch a counterattack, led by General Thomas Jonathan Jackson, who would later become known as Stonewall Jackson. The Confederate troops, inspired by Jackson's bravery and leadership, push the Union Army back, and soon, the battlefield is filled with the sounds of retreat. In the words of General P.G.T. Beauregard, the enemy was routed, and our troops were victorious, but at a great cost in lives and treasure. As we reflect on the events of that fateful day, we are reminded of the brutal reality of war, where courage and sacrifice are often measured in the face of overwhelming odds. As the sun sets on July 21, 1861, the First Battle of Bull Run comes to an end, leaving behind a trail of destruction, death, and despair. The Union Army has suffered a crushing defeat, with over 2,800 casualties, while the Confederates have lost around 2,000 men. The battle may be over, but its impact on the course of the war will be felt for years to come. As we conclude this segment, we find ourselves at the threshold of a new era in American history, one marked by conflict, transformation, and ultimately, freedom. In our final segment, we will explore the decline and aftermath of the First Battle of Bull Run and examine its lasting legacy on the United States. Welcome back to History with Herodotus, as we continue our journey through the annals of time, uncovering the hidden treasures of our collective past. As the dust settles on the battlefield, the reality of the Union Army's defeat becomes starkly clear. The Confederate victory at Bull Run has sent shockwaves throughout the North, with many questioning the ability of the Union to prevail in the conflict. In the words of President Abraham Lincoln, the Battle of Bull Run has taught us a bitter lesson, that this is a more serious and difficult task than we had anticipated. The Union Army's commander. General Irvin McDowell is relieved of his command, and a new sense of urgency settles over the North. In the aftermath of the battle, both sides begin to reassess their strategies and prepare for the long and bloody conflict that lies ahead. The Confederacy, emboldened by its victory, begins to consolidate its gains and plan for future offensives. Meanwhile, the Union Army undergoes a significant transformation, with General George McClellan taking command and beginning to rebuild and reorganize the army. One of the most significant consequences of the Battle of Bull Run is the realization that the war will not be a quick or easy victory for either side. The battle has shown that the Confederacy is a formidable opponent, and that the Union will need to commit significant resources and manpower to achieve its goals. As historian James McPherson notes, the Battle of Bull Run was a wake-up call for the North, a reminder that the war would not be won overnight, but would require a long and sustained effort. As we reflect on the legacy of the First Battle of Bull Run, it is clear that this pivotal moment in American history has had a lasting impact on the United States. The battle marked a turning point in the Civil War, as both sides began to realize the true nature and scope of the conflict. It also highlighted the importance of leadership, strategy, and logistics in determining the outcome of battles and wars. In the years that followed, the Union Army would go on to win many significant victories, including the Battle of Antietam, the Battle of Gettysburg, and the Siege of Vicksburg. However, the lessons learned at Bull Run would remain a crucial part of the Union's strategy, as it adapted and evolved to meet the challenges of the war. Today, the First Battle of Bull Run is remembered as a pivotal moment in American history, one that marked the beginning of a long and bloody conflict that would ultimately shape the course of the nation. As we look back on this battle, we are reminded of the bravery and sacrifice of the soldiers who fought and died on both sides, and of the enduring legacy of freedom and unity that emerged from the ashes of war. As we conclude our journey through the annals of time, we are left with a deeper understanding of the complexities and challenges of the Civil War, and a greater appreciation for the sacrifices made by those who fought to preserve the Union. Join us next time as we explore more hidden treasures of our collective past and examine the enduring impact of history on our world today. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, remember that to understand the present, we must first understand the past.